Good morning, everyone. I'm gathering here in Facebook land for some morning prayers and an encouraging word. So please share this with your friends, your family, those that you feel would benefit from some encouragement today. So as I woke up here and I was preparing myself for the process of coming on here, and I've been doing this every day since the beginning of the quarantine, and just really has been a part of my day. So thank you all so much for joining in, and thank you for the $3, the $5, the $2 donations, the $20, $50, all the different donations that you've given. They all really encourage me. Not to say that I'm just encouraged by the monetary blessing, but also your hearts and your likes and your kind words that you've been giving definitely has really helped me stay in that place of service. So for me, the service is a great opportunity to reflect self-identity and to reflect upon your life and upon my life. It's been the greatest catalyst for the freedom from those things that have bound me, the behaviors, the addictions, all those things have washed away in my service work to human beings. And I'm very grateful for that opportunity to serve you today. So what I would really love to share with all of you today is this idea of our relationship with the elementals. And in relating to the elementals, there's so much that has been said, right, in the ancient manuscripts and the teachings of in antiquity, the indigenous teachings, so much of those things. And oftentimes in our contemporary culture, we can feel a little bit of a disconnect, I believe, from the relationship to the elements. And still, the elements are there. The elements are a part of our lives. And I have come to realize that I have a relationship with 7 elements. And many people have a different relationship to the elements. There are disciplines and traditions that have 5 elements, that have 6 elements. There are all different numbers of how people can quantify that certain space that is held within the metaphysical, within the spiritual, and also within the physical realm of reality. So for me, I'll list them to you this morning, and you can kind of come to your realization. Maybe this is what you feel are the elementals in your life. Maybe there's a different elemental idea and concept in your life. Maybe you have a relationship with 9. I'm not going to say that mine are perfect, but this is just one illustration of identifying them and also giving name to them. So in this space this morning, I'd like to share with you, of course, the 4 kind of common elements: the air, the water, the fire, the earth, but then also looking to the idea of being in relationship with gravity, and then being in relationship with time, and then also spirit. These are the 7 elements that I have come to realize in my life. And as I realize those elementals in my life, I've come to a place of recognizing my relationship to them, and how my relationship in this world is not defined by my relationship to the elements per se, but it is definitely molded by that and guided and protected and cared for in my relationship to the elements. I would say that my relationship to the elements is somewhat of the road that I travel in relationship to all beings. We have a certain understanding that inside of the container of relational spirituality, that there is a great unfolding of life. There is a great unfolding of the emotional states that we go into as human beings, and how we learn to navigate that is really how we learn to create sovereignty in our lives. So sovereignty is being able to go into your emotions, to go into the parts of your life that create density, and then to be able to utilize that energy in a way that serves yourself, your family, your community, and ultimately the planet. Many of us that have density within our lives, that have a relationship to the trauma that has gone on in our childhood, that has gone on in our adult life, that has gone on through relationships. That trauma creates a density within the fabric of life, and in turn, it can create a gravity. It can pull in its likeness. You can begin to reflect yourself in the gravitational field of your trauma. In relationship to the elements, we find an ability to navigate those traumas in a way that really serves us for today and for the moment in which we reside. And I'm going to give an example of how my relationship to time, the great keeper, right? The great timekeeper, Father Time, as in the personification of time that many of us have grown to understand time as. When we look at time as a keeper, a gateway into realization and having a relationship with time, what we can do is we can come to an understanding that inside of the container of time, there is an opportunity to go into the density of trauma and to bring about clarity, transformation, and hope. So in my life, there were many times in my life when, as a child, I created gravity around a situation or circumstance. These are the way that we fortify the gravitational field and the density of trauma is by saying things like, oh, always. This always happens to me, or this has happened to me since I was a kid, or I've always been this way. What we're doing is we're fortifying the density of the architecture of the trauma in our life, and that in turn is affecting the metaphysical architecture. It's literally causing the subatomic frequency, the place where consciousness becomes matter, to shift. Now, this is really important for us to understand as we become in relationship with the optimal state of human design. Getting back to the realization of how time can help you free yourself from the density and the captivity of your own internal trauma is by utilizing time to go back in and navigate those instances that created a trauma in your life. For instance, what is the energy of guilt and shame? The energy of guilt and shame is a program that came into you. It's a program such as an app on your phone, right? I love to use the analogy of apps on our phone because this is something that pertains to our contemporary culture. Us in our life, right? We can go to our Pandora or I guess our Spotify now, or I use Amazon Music when we want to listen to music, when we want to go work out at the gym. We don't go to our bank account, right? When we want to watch a video on how to fix our washing machine, we don't go to Facebook, we go to YouTube. These are the things that help us understand how to navigate the emotions within our lives, because each one of the emotions that you have inside of you was programmed into you by an experience. You actually allowed for that download to happen. Am I making sense out there? Please let me know. So, sometimes I feel like this information is so important. I get excited and I start to get ahead of myself. So pull me back in if you have a question. So as we begin to navigate this realization that time is a keeper of the space in which the programs first began to initiate themselves, when we first got the download, right? What we can do is we can go back to that time when that download happened, and we can actually manipulate the energy to serve our greatest good. Or what we can do is we can uninstall the program. Now, this happens only inside of the deepest depths, right, of our conscious and subconscious mind. So there are gateways that we need to realize. There are certain keepers of that information that allow for us to get into those depths. And this comes with practice. You see, the neural pathways that lead to these densities inside of our human experience, they are not necessarily given to us. They come through practice. And what is the practice? The practice is through breath. It's through sound. There are many teachings that I can give you that can help you understand how to access the trance, how to access those parts of your brain that will allow you to go in and to navigate and be in relationship with time and the elementals. But this is a practice, right? It's a sacred practice of transformation. I'm going to be facilitating a practice, a journey into the Sacred Seven, which will give a lot of this information to individuals. So back to the story that I was sharing with you about how time helped me free myself and helped me utilize the density of shame that came into my life. So I was a little guy. I was probably in the 4th grade. And, many of you that know a little bit about my story or have read my book, The Sacred Seven, you know that I was involved in organized crime as a child. And I was used by my mom to shoplift. My mom had a crew of people that would come to the house every morning. They would put on their work suits just like everybody out there, going to their 9 to 5. Well, my parents would go out into the world and they would shoplift. This was the routine every day, growing up in Portland, Oregon, and actually out here with my dad in Peoria, Arizona. My dad had a gang name. He was called Robin Hood in the little barrio we lived in. So my mom, right, she had been taking me to steal. And, as a kid, kids learn from their parents. So I had began to steal on my own. Like I would go walk down to Fred Meyer's. We used to call it Freddy's. And I would shoplift. And this was how I got cool toys. So one day I decided to go, and I remember I was walking down the aisle, and this was when Transformers first came out. Everything is a replay, right? These new movies and everything. This all came from the 80s when Transformers first were apart. And there was this Bumblebee Transformer. I don't know if any of you remember Bumblebee, but he was a bug, like a VW bug. And it was up there on this shelf, and it was looking so cool, and man, I just wanted that VW bug. So what did I do? I decided I was going to steal this bug. Now I put it into a bag. I had went and bought a piece of paper, because this is what my mom used to do. She would go buy a big piece of paper for 59 cents back in the day, a cardboard piece of paper, throw the cardboard piece of paper away and use the bag to shoplift. Well, this was what I did. So I started filling my bag with toys. I turned the corner, and here's this security guard. The security guard comes and grabs me, wrestles me down, takes me down. I mean, I'm just a little guy, but he's like holding me in his arms, running with me through the store. I'm screaming because I didn't know who he was. I thought he was trying to abduct me. Gets me to the basement, and then he starts, drilling me. And he's like this big buff dude, and he's like looking at this little kid, man. I'm just this little kid. And, he starts telling me about, how it's so horrible that I was shoplifting and everything, and I'm crying and all that. And he says, well, I have to call your parents, and you're not going to be able to come back to Fred Meyer. You're going to be trespassed from this space. So he calls my house where my grandparents lived, and my mom wasn't even allowed to come and get me because she had already been trespassed from that store. In other words, she had been caught shoplifting there, and she wasn't allowed to be a part of that. So she had to send my stepfather. Now, my stepfather is a career criminal, and he did 13 years for armed robbery. His name was Ron Clancy, gangster, tatted up, all that. And he comes in and he gets me, and I'm walking through the store with him, and he's kind of like, I'm walking right beside him, and he's like basically like talking to me about like, and this is like not language that I use, but this is language that was used back then. He's like telling me that I popped my cherry, and that now I'm one of them, and he's laughing about this whole situation, which I'm just wiping the tears away. I'm scared as scared can be. So I get into the car, and I remember the car was like one of these old $500 cars that my mom used to buy, basically drive them until they fell apart. Beer bottles on the bottom of the floor. I'm sitting now in the back seat in between the two buckets, and mom is like looking back at me, and she's saying to me, did you learn this from me? And, as a child, right, your main thing is to defend your mom. I mean, I was always in high defense of my mom. Anybody ever talked anything about my mom, it was on. That's how it was for me as a kid. So my mom is looking back at me, and she's saying all these things to me. And I'm saying, no, Mom, I didn't learn this from you. I didn't learn this from you. Like, I'm basically telling her that she's not at fault. So what happened? When I decided to go back into this space as a grown adult, looking at that initiation of shame and guilt, where I began to feel guilty, right, of the culture that I was a part of. I started to feel like blamed and shamed and all of this resonant frequency of guilt. I went back into that time through traveling through time. I went back into that child, that little boy, Andrew. And instead of saying, no, I didn't learn this from you, I looked at my mom and I said, Mom, I'm sorry that you're addicted to drugs. And I know that this isn't a lifestyle that is the best for you. But yes, you showed me how to steal. And yes, if you were a mom that had taken time for me to teach me how to be able to function in this society, I wouldn't have gone through all the things that I went through. But in you didn't have the ability to get that help. And I understand that. And I want you to know that this shame, this guilt is not my shame. It's not my guilt. And I release it. And this is through meditation practices of sitting with that and utilizing time and relationship value to go back to that space. So I'm asking you and I'm challenging you now. Many of us have time, right? Many of us have been laid off from our jobs. Still, there are those that are being affected by these programs that are within the subconscious, that are deep down inside of your mind, that are in places that are in the dark. How do you go into those places? Be in relationship with time. Be in relationship with time and do not be confined by the linear acceptance of time. Realize that it is a cycle and you can manifest yourself in any part of that cycle that serves you. You can rewrite the programs that have been installed in you. You can uninstall some of the programs. Some of the programs of guilt, shame, all of these things can be uninstalled from your matrix, from your reality. You can utilize the power of being in relationship with time. If you want to go deeper into some of these practices, you can by checking out the Sacred Seven group that we have here. Me and Monica are going to be facilitating a journey into the depths of the conscious mind through sound, through some of the practices that have been used in communities all over the world since the very dawn of cultural identity to really help people loosen themselves from the captivity of the subconscious mind. I have understood that even in this existence, if you have not gone into the density of those places, you can actually bring forth through past lives those densities, those traumas. You can bring them into your life. And the only way to access those things is through those neural pathways that bring us into that limitless representation of time, mainly through the sound of the drum, through the sound of the gong, through the chimes, through the singing bowl, through the flute. It's music that creates the wave. If you imagine individuals' consciousness as a surfer on a wave, right? It's sound that creates that wave that allows for us to travel. Sound is the manipulation of energy. This is a way that we touch each other. I'm touching you right now through light. Isn't that amazing to think about? And you, as I see your beautiful faces up here, are touching me through light. Oh, the forgiveness. Yeah, see, this is the thing that I feel about forgiveness. Most of the time, forgiveness is something that I feel, okay, forgiveness is a supernatural download, Zeke. It's something that when we think about forgiveness, right, this is like something that comes from God. Okay, now what is the practical application of forgiveness? Forgiveness in its practical application is being in the person. Now, this is something that can happen as well. When you begin to step into your empathy, and this is feeling, you as an individual, I know a little bit about the way you grew up, very similar to the way I grew up in a lot of ways. That empathy that we created in our survival, right? That empathy that I created in order to navigate the situations and circumstances where I was in with a lot of people that would cut my throat for $20, right? That realization of how to navigate the energy that kept me safe. This is the empathetic response, and you have that in you, Zeke. The empathetic response is going into the life of your parents, of your mom, of your dad, and not just realizing them from the child within you, but realizing them from the feminine and the masculine. See, if you can look at them in that way, you can feel into why they were in the space that they were in. For instance, with my grandfather was a career military, 23 years in the military, and he used to wake me up in the middle of the night when he would come home drunk from the bar. This is my Apache grandfather, Leroy, and he would come home drunk from the bar and he would wake me up in the middle of the night, torturing me. I'm this little boy, right? He would wake me up and he would push my fingers back and give me, burns on my arms and stuff with his hands by twisting me and things like that. And, for years I was so resentful. I was so angry at him until I allowed myself to travel into him, not to just look at the outward existence of him, right? But to look at him as the person who was in that space. I would ask myself over and over and over again, well, why would he do this? Like, why would a grown-ass man that has a military background, that's like a professional killer, basically, torture this little boy? And what I realized is his trauma, and I realized his pain. And I realized that motivation of every single individual in this world, as distorted as it can be, and I know that this is going to be hard for those that have gone through sexual abuse, that have gone through physical abuse, emotional abuse, all of those motivations of those that have attacked us, that have hurt us, it actually comes from the same place that motivates all of us. And that is a space of either them needing to feel safe, them needing to feel secure, them needing to feel love. Those are the two things, and this is why in the tradition there are two main prayers, and that's the beauty way prayer and then the protection way prayer. Because if you look at, like, and this is a Apache belief, this is Dene, Ide, this is the very origin of my ancestry. These are the belief systems that really form, right, these indigenous understandings of the human condition. So once you realize that this powerful thing of asking yourself continually over and over again, why did this person hurt me? Why did this person do this to me? This is the confusion of the illusion of separation from them, right? You're creating the illusion around your own inability to look at them as a human being. And this is hard for me to digest, man. I was like, there were so many times when I would wake up in the middle of the night and some junkie had stole our TV or our food stamps, or, just the shit that kids go through when they're living in a dope house. This was my reality as a kid. Watching my mom get beat up by the police, there was so many things inside of me that I had to come to a place of recognizing, releasing, and transforming the density of that human emotion to bring me to a place in which I can say to myself, wow, I rose my hand up. And this is another thing too, that when you really understand how time is an ally in our own optimal state of human design, you can understand your pre-existence. Now, I'm getting into some really deep concepts here, and I understand if there are those of you that want to disconnect from this, maybe because of your religious understanding, your background, all of these things. These are things that I've worked through too, but I can tell you now in my life that there is a place that is so free. Jesus said, I have come to take captivity captive, right? This is the real understanding of the Christ consciousness. There is a place that is so freeing and limitless in this human experience that you can look back at the totality of every single thing that you've gone through, all of the relationships you've had, even your relationship with COVID right now, COVID in this camp, right? All of these relationships, and you can say, I signed up for it. And this is freeing. Now, I know that, man, it's like so hard to digest when you think about, okay, I signed up to be a little boy that would be abused by his grandfather. I signed up to be a little boy that would go and use heroin with his father. I signed up to be a little boy that would go and have to steal with his mom to support her cocaine habit. I signed up to be a little boy that would watch his mother get beat up in front of him by the police. I signed up by a little boy that would be sexually abused at an early age. I signed up to be a little boy that would have to go out and do things to get crack cocaine and get heroin that I'm like challenged even in my most deepest vulnerability to release to you, the people that I know that love me. All of those things, right? When you look back at it and you understand your sovereignty and you understand that you are the individual that created the platform for you to be the sovereign, empowered spiritual being. These are the things that an experiential God allows to happen. Now, I know for many of us, right, when we look at life, we think to ourselves, we struggle with belief because there's been this conceptualization of God as this person that sits on somewhere on a cloud and sends down lightning bolts and makes good stuff happen and makes bad stuff happen and all of these different things. And it's like, for me, right, freeing yourself from the idea of good and bad is also a liberating process. And as we're in relationship with the elements, and specifically time, we can begin to allow ourselves to be free from that which binds us, that which creates captivity in our minds. I hope you're getting something from this, because I sure am. In remembering these things, man, it just brings a smile to my face. I got to tell you, before I came on here, I was really feeling down, you guys. I was really feeling like, oh man, I just want to go drum. I want to be back in the hospitals. I want to be out there playing music, and Monica, she was sharing this morning and she was like, we are so much of what we do. We really are. Like a lot of our understanding of our lives comes from our practices, right? And yes, there are those things, but I have to remind myself that I am first a child. I am first a grandchild. I'm first a father. I'm first the love to Monica. I am first that husband to her, that home place. I am first these things, right? And then I'm these behaviors, all these other behaviors that have come into my life, drumming, using sound, making art, all of these expressions. These are outside of those very formative, foundational aspects of reality. And this is important to hold on to, because when nothing else is there, you know what people find? When you take everything away from an individual, and I've been in places like that. I've been in maximum security federal detention facilities where, guess what? You don't have a job anymore. Guess what? You don't have a bank account anymore. You don't have a car anymore. You don't have a house anymore. You don't have any of that stuff that this contemporary culture uses to define people. Right? So many people are in that place. They're shaking right now because they have put their identity on a ground that is not solid. Put your identity in a ground that is solid. Realize your nature as a child, as a grandchild, as a father, as a son, as a mother, as a granddaughter, as those places in which you can be so strongly founded, right? That the earth itself could shake around you. The trees could be on fire, right? The heavens could open up and lightning bolts could be striking down to you, but you are equipped to weather that. These are the things that you learn, when you're in an institution like that, believe it or not. Because the people that are basically, stuck in their cell underneath the covers, scared all the time, are the people that have lost their hope in their identity, which is an outside reflection. All of those outside reflections that come to you are merely the confusion of the illusion of separation from your citizenship as being a spiritual being. You are a spiritual being. Inside of you is the very intelligence of the earth itself. You are the totality of the consciousness and its representations of all its relations. Relationship, spiritual relationship, relational spirituality brings freedom to you. And I want to share that with you because I know we're struggling together. We're in this, man. All of us are going through it. And as we come to this place of redefining who we are, as the outside world and all of its beauty begins to fade away, like the analogy of the apple that I share with you sometimes. The analogy of the apple is the apple's beautiful when it's on the tree, right? It needs to fall to the ground because its mission isn't to be beautiful. Your mission in life is to not have a big ass bank account and to have cars and to have all the different things of the world. That's not your mission. Your mission is to know who you are. Your mission is to understand the power in you as you can relate to these spiritual gifts that equip us to navigate relationship with the air, the water, the fire, the earth, gravity, time, and spirit. As you begin to be a time traveler and you begin to realize the infinite opportunity that is within you, you practice these things within the neural pathways of the mind. Man, this comes to me right now, and I don't know how you guys are going to take this, but I'm going to share it with you anyway, because you know what? I don't have anything to lose. This is word, Zeke. Yep, for sure, Tanglefoot. I'm coming with it right now. So, my dad, right, was a professional thief. I mean, literally a professional thief, organized professional crime, like every day. And these guys would go into stores, all right, and they would empty out the perfume case. That was one of the things that he specialized in was perfume and cologne, because back in the day, I mean, you guys remember Polo and Jacquard and Obsession and all of this stuff, And so they would go into these spaces.